Hello again, it's your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back again for another episode of the History of Comics podcast. This time, part 3 of the life of Charles Schultz. When we last left off, Peanuts was starting to truly explode into the world in both comic strip and merchandising, and Schultz was setting out to expand his ever-growing empire. On March 1957, Schultz mailed Harry Gilbert a single-panel strip on Bridge called It's Only a Game. It would later appear in 28 papers on November 3rd. Meanwhile, Peanuts expanded into comic books when Jim Sasseville provided original art and stories for $100 a week. He was an ideal artist for the job, as he had previously filled in for Schultz back in August of 1955. With his Only a Game strip, Schultz hired him to provide the art, paying him $500 a month and 50% of the profits. Charles Schultz would repeatedly state he thought Jim was a better cartoonist than he was. However, as Peanuts started to dominate more and more of his professional life, the strip was canceled by Schultz after 63 weeks, ending on January 1959. Meanwhile, on August 20th, 1958, Schultz's fifth child, Jill Marie, was born. She would be the last, as Joyce immediately scheduled a hysterectomy afterwards, stating that 5 kids was enough. It was during this time that the first signs of strain in their marriage also started to appear, as Joyce was never as faithful as Charles was, who continued to support the Church of God, who the Minneapolis Star said owned 1/10 of Peanuts. Schultz remained the chief financier of the church and even did a painting of Jesus for the altar. However, Schultz started to fear he was doing too much, something that he knew would not be good for the church's long-term health. This was one factor in a larger decision to move to California, where they eventually settled in Sassapool, California at Coffee Lane. There was no Church of God nearby, so they enrolled in the local Methodist church where Schultz would teach Sunday school. Meanwhile, Peanuts was about to explode into the merchandising world. It already made some entries with the Hungerfield Plastic Corporation, creating 6-inch figurines of characters in 1958, along with Hallmark cards designed by Schultz himself, appearing in 1960, up to 50 for every holiday and occasion. The license with Ford for their Falcon, which went up to $75,000 to $100,000 in 1963, with Schultz pocketing $200,000 for himself. Schultz remained proud to advertise for Ford, considering it a man's car. His father, Carl, was a proud Ford owner. It was during the commercials, too, that the Peanuts characters first appeared animated, done by Bill Melendez from Disney, which would begin a long and successful relationship with these characters. However, as all this merchandising brought about criticism from the Newspaper Comics Council, who attacked Schultz for being too greedy. This angered Schultz more than anything, arguing that just because Peanuts makes money in merchandise doesn't hurt the integrity of the strip. Plus, he soon pointed out that merchandising was where the real money was at, as it quickly trumped the money he was making as syndicating his strip. With so much value in Peanuts and his creator Charles Schultz, United Features Syndicate took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on him with an annual premium of $26,675.50 a year. Despite Schultz's defense of Peanuts merchandise, college-age kids did start to distrust him, calling Schultz a sellout, with William R. Zinser expressing personal disappointment. However, Schultz was too busy to notice. He had a new house to build. Joyce was busy establishing a lush home, putting in a tennis court for $20,000, a new driveway, and a $5,000 square-foot ranch house to be the main dwelling. The old home was to be converted into Schultz's studio, along with a state-of-the-art kitchen. The new home had bike paths, playgrounds, a baseball diamond, a pool, and a pasture for cows, horses, dogs, cats, ducks, turtles, and even a pet mouse. There was even a kiosk with a ping-pong table in his own kitchen. It was meant for families and thus had the same strict rules that Schultz lived by. No drinking, no smoking, and no swearing. The new home was so overwhelming, though, even Charles, who when he gave guests a tour of the grounds, they would note that he seemed even shocked about what was all in it. Meanwhile, the strip continued to reflect his change in their lives, as Joyce was called the First Lady of Sebastopol, California, and Lucy decided to run Charlie Brown for president, with the intention of making herself the First Lady. Lucy was easily the most ambitious character in Peanuts, and if it wasn't for her creation, Charlie Brown would have remained a smart-mouthed prankster in the initial run. With Lucy constantly cutting him down to size, he became the melancholy Charlie Brown we know and love today. It was also around this time that another strong female was introduced into Charlie Brown's life, Peppermint Patty, the tomboy and star athlete of his friends, first appearing in the strip on August 22nd, 1966. She was inspired by his cousin Patricia Swanson, whose name came from Charles Schultz noticing that she would always have a plate of peppermints in her house. She would soon represent another subtle way Charles Schultz would use Peanuts on social commentary, as Peppermint Patty was an excellent athlete playing alongside the boys despite being a girl. It would, however, lead to some allegations that she was a lesbian, and even larger discrimination when one thinks about it, as why does one think just because a girl is a tomboy and plays sports, she must be a lesbian? It didn't help her bookish friend Marcy, who first appeared on July 20th, 1971, constantly called her Sir, something that even Patty objected to early in the strip. Schultz would distance Patty from being a lesbian, partly out of concern for his cousin, and during the 1980s, the character would even develop a crush on Pigpen, the constantly dirty member of the Peanuts gang first introduced back on July 13th, 1964. Marcy herself would become a way for Schultz to provide some social commentary as well, when during a July-September 1973 series of strips, she reluctantly joins the baseball team with Peppermint Patty, where she starts to receive chauvinistic insults from a male teammate Thibault. While Marcy characters was always slow to anger, the end of the story arc ends with her finally slapping Thibault senseless. Of interesting note, Thibault never tormented Patty, probably because he knew he knew better than to cross her. With the new house in Sebastopol built, the Schultzes also bought a house in San Francisco to their friend Jen Dower, Joyce's friend, while also using it as a place to stay when visiting the city. One notable thing about the Schultzes, despite their growing wealth, is that they didn't invest in stocks until 1969. Carl, Charles' dad, at one time suggested buying a hotel as an investment, but Joyce mocked him and Charles both, since their mechanical skills would have made them horrible landlords. Once their home was finished, the entire family was amazed, and it was during the family gathering that the phrase, "happiness is a warm puppy," was first mentioned, before first appearing in the strip on April 25th, 1960. However, it would be Constance Connie Klingsborg Booker who would turn Peanuts into a true merchandising empire, especially with that phrase. A fellow Minnesota native, she had previously made a name for herself making high-quality Winnie the Pooh coloring comic book, investing $500 of her own money to craft a prototype, and flying to New York to secure the rights from Shirley Schlesinger, whose late husband owned the merchandising rights to Pooh. Booker remained undeterred when every publisher turned her down with the idea. With her husband John as a business partner, along with Jim Young, a designer at the window trimming store she worked at, Connie mortgaged her house, printed and marketed the Winnie the Pooh coloring book herself, and by the end of Christmas of 1960 had sold 53,000 copies for $3 apiece, netting $40,000 for herself. The following year, seeing potential in Peanuts, Connie personally approached Schultz about licensing opportunities. Schultz liked her drive and continued to live by the barber's motto his father followed, and that he must not only serve the public, but also have something to sell. Connie Booker and her newly formed Determined Publications created a calendar-sized date book, an unheard-of idea at the time, complete with Peanuts characters and nuggets of wisdom from the strip, ultimately selling 25,000 copies. Her next idea was a book, Happiness is a Warm Puppy, which was published in November 1962, and while booksellers never sold a hardcover book like this before for $2 a copy, $12 in today's world, it would end up being the fifth most sold book that year, with 1.35 million sold by 1967. It will be followed by Security as a Thumb in a Blanket in 1963, which was the number 2 nonfiction best-selling book that year, eventually reaching 500,000 sold by 1967. The follow-up books, All the Friends I Got and Christmas's Together Time, sold 175,000 copies to 125,000 respectively. Happiness will receive some criticisms, such as critics Richard Shekel and Sam William Hawthorne, who countered that Happiness was being productive at work. Schultz again defended himself, pointing out that even his characters in Peanuts questioned such ideas. This wouldn't be the only merchandise Connie Booker's Determined Products would produce, as she also created sweatshirts in 1965 for bookstores, something never tried before. Most thought sweatshirts were just for athletes. But it soon proved another bonanza, with each shirt featuring a Peanuts character on the front with one of the more popular sayings on the back. By 1967, Peanuts boutiques appeared in department stores dedicated to their merchandise, with Shelfridge of London having a special Snoopy house in time for Christmas. Under all this, Booker owned 90% of all licensing deals, and was notable about her products was the high quality she put into them, which went to the plush dolls of Snoopy she produced with Young, that was so well made MIT awarded it for excellence in materializing a 2D drawing. Schultz praised Booker's work, but soon as an even bigger avenue for Peanuts was about to break through, Charlie Brown and his friends were going to television. On May 1965, Lee Mendelson sold a Christmas show of Peanuts to Coca-Cola. Schultz had previously denied film and TV rights for nearly 10 years, but Mendelsohn, who produced A Boy Named Charlie Brown in 1963, a documentary with interviews of Charles Schultz, was finally able to change their mind, despite having never produced a half-hour program. Mendelsohn had previously made a name for himself producing the documentary A Man Named Mays about the legendary baseball player Willie Mays. To Schultz's insistence, Mendelsohn brought on Bill Melendez, who also worked on the Charlie Brown documentary. A former Disney animator who worked on Fantasia, Pinocchio, Dumbo, and Bambi, he had formed his own production company in 1963, and Schultz trusted him to bring his characters to life, especially as he had then Disney-fy his characters in the Ford commercials he previously worked on. The special was given 6 months to be produced and a $150,000 budget. The cartoon would eventually consist of 10,000 hand-painted cells and, first for animation, use actual kid voices for the characters. Vince Giriardi provided the music, creating the now classic jazz theme that is synonymous with Peanuts today. One thing Schultz insisted on was that Linus recite the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 2, 8-14, about the birth of Jesus to remind viewers the true meaning of Christmas, stating if they didn't do it, who will? Schultz had become more spiritual than religious in his later years, though his faith remained strong, and continued to shine through in his strip. On October 1963, Sally professed she prayed in school in the strip. The religion of Peanuts was so prevalent, it led to the book The Gospel According to Peanuts by Robert Short, which was published in 1965, ultimately selling 10 million copies. Schultz didn't believe in being judgmental and that all were destined for salvation. He didn't even push religion on his kids. The previously mentioned strip aside, Schultz would come out against forced prayer in schools. Peanuts' religious influence, though, was so effective that writer John Updike noted that church pamphlets across the country started to resemble the strip. Back to the cartoon, it was soon $25,000 over budget, and when finally previewed for the network executives, they expressed worries over the show being slow, flat, and was especially worried about those Bible quotes. Nevertheless, the Charlie Brown Christmas special premiered on December 9th, 1965 at 7:30 p.m., preempting the regularly scheduled Munsters, with 15.5 million TV households watching the special, at the time nearly half of all the viewing audiences in America. And the critics raved. It would soon win both a Peabody and Emmy, and has since become recognized as a regular event in Christmas viewing. With the success of the Charlie Brown Christmas special, the next holiday to tackle was Halloween, with its A Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, which premiered on October 27, 1966, inspired by the unseen holiday spirit Linus believes in, first appearing in the strip in 1959. Vince Giriardi once again provided the music while Bill Melendez produced the animation, and it became an instant success, receiving an Emmy nomination, and like the Christmas special, is now an annual fixture for TV viewing in America every Halloween. However, Schultz's new success would be overshadowed when his father, Carl, died on May 28, 1966. Buried back in St. Paul, Minnesota, he didn't even attend the funeral due to his fear of flying and over-anxiety over his death. Plus, Schultz reportedly rejected his stepmother, openly and insensitively stating he hoped he and his mother Dina were now reunited in heaven. By 1967, Peanuts appeared in 745 daily strips and 393 Sunday papers, covering half of the U.S. papers and bumping Dick Tracy as the top comic strip in the country. Despite his professional success, he grew more distance from Joyce, who instead focused on her more projects. Their children were raising with class as well, as Charles was more gentle with the children, and Joyce was left to be the disciplinarian. Also, as his kids got older, they started to baffle him, and he started to put pressure on Meredith to help with the younger siblings. He preferred she dressed conservatively, though would later state that he had no problem with the miniskirt, the risque clothing for women at the time in 1967. This would also widen the rift between Charles and Joyce, who would continue to bury himself in work to ignore her. He was no longer Charlie Brown to do her Lucy Van Pelt. He was Shoulder, and his work was his piano. Even with his success, Schultz tried to answer as much fan mail as possible, which by June of 1967 was 500 pieces a week. However, by March of earlier that year, when he made an appearance on Life magazine, he couldn't keep up, and instead he dictated replies to his secretary, Sue Broadwell, for 30 minutes a day. Schultz's drawings techniques remain old school as well, using the same drawing board from 1946 at a mere $24 cost. According to Schultz, he had to rebuild the strip every day to keep it fresh. At his studio, he would have the same lunch, a ham sandwich with a glass of milk, sometimes with some tapioca pudding made by Joyce's mother, who he named Lucy's grandmother after. The kids came home at 4 p.m. from school, where they were always welcome in the studio. Meredith wanted to carry on the strip after he stopped and even demonstrated some drawing skill, though Schultz would later claim he wanted one of his sons to do it. The Peanuts merchandising empire continued to grow as well, with Connie Bucher appearing 1 to 2 times a month to review ideas for the licensing. AV Enterprises, for example, made Peanuts jewelry, which after a $10,000 startup in sales, jumped $2.8 million over 3 years. Schultz did insist on inspecting the merchandise to ensure the quality and sometimes ejecting the products that didn't match the strip's content. For instance, when a Charlie Brown baseball glove was proposed, Schultz shot it down, stating, "What kid would want that? Charlie Brown couldn't catch a thing." On May 24th, 1967, it was named Charles Schultz Day by Governor Ronald Reagan in California, who was a personal fan of the strip. He would proclaim, "Happiness is having Charles Schultz as a resident," with all those bucks rolling in. Schultz would start to be embarrassed by his income as it grew bigger, and even once stated no cartoonist could become a millionaire, though by the time he made that statement, he already was one. The strip continued to evolve, and readers cried when the Van Pelts moved. Schultz soon found himself compared to John Glenn, and big names started to write letters to him, from Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and Yul Brynner. Other readers would ask requests, one even going so far to ask for $65,000, which Schultz graciously refused. Meanwhile, Peanuts started to spread even further with Halloween and Thanksgiving special, which premiered on November 20th, 1973, with Charlie Brown and his friends celebrating Thanksgiving, with Linus leading the group in a prayer before the meal, recalling the original Thanksgiving by the Pilgrims. Strangely, a recent controversy came up about when viewers noticed that Franklin, the one black character in the group, sat on one side of the table by himself in a lawn chair, making some modern viewers believe it was a racist depiction, despite Charles Schultz's original insistence to be included to show a diverse group of fans to TV viewers. The special ended up winning an Emmy in 1974, and like the Christmas and Halloween specials, remains regular holiday viewing. Eventually, 75 specials would be produced in total, 16 with music by Vince Guaraldi, and most directed by Bill Melendez, who also ended up providing the voices for Snoopy and Woodstock, Snoopy's friend Bird, as Schultz could refuse to let animals speak like actual English. Instead, Melendez recorded some gibberish and sped it up for the cartoon. By 1967, Peanuts grossed $20 million in merchandise sales and then $50 million in 1969, before jumping to $150 million in 1971. That was time with Snoopy expanding as a character. He was notable as the only character who could kiss anyone in the strip. In February 1920, in the 1960 strip, and Snoopy's doghouse was moved to its iconic broadside view. It was originally presented in a 3/4 view where the reader could even see the entrance. It soon became apparent his thoughts reflected that of his creator, Charles Schultz, who had him fight the Red Bear in the summer of 1965. He also created a Snoopy dance, which he did as a joyous expression to torment Lucy. Much of Snoopy's personality was based on Schultz's dog Spike, and he soon became so popular he was written in as a candidate for president in both 1968 and 1972, which got so bad that the state of California had to make it illegal for a fictional character to be written in. Soon, Snoopy became the first animal to take over a human comic strip as his character continued to duel with the Red Baron, resulting in bullet holes in the side of the doghouse / Soupwith Camel, which worried some readers for Snoopy's safety. It wasn't long before popular culture followed, and Snoopy, along with the rest of the Peanuts gang, became ingrained in it as the Beatles were. Security Blanket made the Webster's Dictionary and references to Linus's blanket, while Happiness Is made Bartlett's familiar quotes. Good grief was soon a common phrase, and the Royal Guardsmen wrote the song Snoopy vs. the Red Baron in 1966, which shot to number 2 on the music charts that year, beat only by I Am a Believer by the Monkees. It resulted in the Royal Guardsmen producing more Peanuts-related songs, such as The Return of the Red Baron and Snoopy's Christmas. By 1959, the Corvair B-58 supersonic bombers were called Snoopy 1 and Snoopy 2. In the comic strip, Snoopy made it to the moon on March 10, 1969, preceding the actual moon landing, and which the Apollo 10 mission would nickname their command module Charlie Brown, while the lunar module was named Snoopy. So, Snoopy did technically land on the moon first. On May 22nd, when the command module Charlie Brown docked with the lunar module Snoopy kissing Charlie Brown in the cartoon during the docking came in with the phrase, "Snoopy came safe from a perilous voyage." With this and all other examples, Peanuts had truly transcended even Walt Kelly's Pogo, which was mostly a reaction to the McCarthy era, but as a result, would only last 2 decades. Peanuts had truly become a timeless comic strip that would live forever. Back home, the Schultzes put their house up for sale in March 1963 for $440,000, but got no takers. It was a further sign of trouble in the marriage, and many noted they were not a tender couple and no longer physically affectionate. Joyce did take notice that Charles liked to get the attention of cute younger women, who was also putting a strain in their marriage. All the while, the Charles Schultz's professional career continued to soar. Once stating a cartoonist could never become a millionaire, he ended up making $1 million in 1 year in 1969 and then $3 million in 1971. The Peanuts empire expanded further with the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown in 1967. Directed by Joseph Hardy with lyrics by Clark Gesner, it premiered on March 7, 1967, eventually performing 1,597 times for 4 years at Theater 80 on St. Mark's. It sold out nearly every show for a $2.3 million gross and would later be adapted for a TV special in 1973, broadcast on NBC. The show is played off and on theatrically ever since, with a 1999 revival being nominated and winning for Best Actor and Actress for a revival in a play at the Tony Awards. All this success brought more attention and fandom, with the average of 25 to 30 fans approaching him every time he attended an Oakland hockey game. He soon developed a hand signal with Joyce to how to avoid him. Nevertheless, he doggedly kept working on the strip and even stated he would be dead without it. By this point, his fandom was so huge, he sent Robert F. Kennedy's 10 children each an individual drawing after his assassination at their request, while also appearing on the cover of Time magazine twice. Joyce, meanwhile, poured herself into a new project with the Redwood Empire Ice Arena on April 28, 1969. It will be called Snoopyville and Snoopy's Town, while that's the arena locally. It came about with Charles and Joyce missing ice skating, being from Minnesota, and wanting a proper ice rink to go to. When the Schultzes moved, they originally joined the Santa Rosa Ice Arena, but when it went defunct, Joyce decided it would be her new project. On August 21st, 1967, they bought the land, expecting to have it built in 4 months at a cost of $177,000. All the while, a personal crisis hit the family when Meredith discovered the truth about her adoption, with her parents still lying about it. As a result, she started to act out, resulting in her being sent to the American school in Switzerland, only to have her further rebel when she got pregnant in 1968. At first, her parents planned to send her back to Minnesota, where she would quietly have a baby and give it up for adoption, but then she decided she would go to a clinic in Japan to have an abortion. Upon her return, Meredith would continue to act out and by 19 was married. With all this, Joyce threw herself into the arena. In the strip, Peanuts declared 1969 as the year of Lucy, though her supervision was shown to be lacking as the budget ballooned to $2,143,000. Edwin V. Doty was hired as general contractor, though John Van Dyke, the architect, doubted Doty was big enough for the job, though Joyce backed Doty. Joyce hiring top talent for crafting it, from the visual effects artists from the Planet of the Apes to make the trees, while sending photographers to get references in Switzerland for the alpine look. Carpenters crafted gingerbread shutters and chalet fronts to add to the aesthetic. She also went to the Oakland Coliseum, where she quizzed the management on arena design and maintenance. Plus, despite being an ice arena, Joyce wanted the atmosphere to be warm, stating, "This is California, it shouldn't be cold." Peanuts continued to soar and evolve, with Franklin, his first black character, being introduced on July 31st, 1968, with an added pathos of being the son of an army man serving in Vietnam. When he tells Charlie Brown this, he replies that his own dad served in the war too, but he wasn't sure which one. Likely a nod that his father, Charles Schultz, was a World War II veteran. Also of note, Franklin was shown to be the intellectual equivalent of Linus, the strip's smartest character, and like Linus, would often quote the Bible, mostly out of the Old Testament. Lila, Snoopy's first owner, also appeared, as Snoopy was now the full-on star of the strip. All the while, the Schultz marriage continued to fray. Many would note that Joyce was wonderful by herself, but around her husband she became shrill and demanding. Strangely, this seemed to fuel Peanuts, as Charles Schultz would state unhappiness is funny. Many often wondered why he seemed so unhappy, but it seemed to him he was using that to fuel his strip. On the arena's opening, 1,700 spectators came, featuring Olympic figure skater Peggy Fleming, Joel Giardelli, the You're a Good Man Charlie Brown Company, and Vince Garibaldi Planet of Music. Fleming was an instant hit, to the point that Snoopy developed a crush on her in the strip, and Joyce still found herself overshadowed by Schultz, as despite all the work she put into building the arena, many credited Schultz himself with the success. The arena's opening ended up tying in with the moon landing, further contributing to the Peanuts strip. Of course, Peanuts had another adventure to conquer. It was going to the movies. A Boy Named Charlie Brown film sold out to the Radio City Music Hall to a larger release on December 4th, 1969. Directed by Bill Melendez and written by Charles Schultz, it followed Charlie Brown's attempt to win a spelling bee contest. Budgeted at $1.1 million, it ended up making $12 million in ticket sales, along with generally positive reviews and an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. It will be followed up by a sequel, Snoopy Come Home, in 1972, but to much less success. By the end of the 20th century, Charles Schultz would have 36 million books in print, making him the fourth best-selling author of the century. However, the arena lost $98,000 its first year, and after an audit by the IRS, it found Schultz owed $630,000 in back taxes. Being a proper Midwestern Republican, Schultz hated his hefty tax bill. However, as work on the arena continued with 10 more acres of land purchased on Hardy's Lane. Then, to continue control his licensed works, Schultz formed the Charles M. Schultz Creative Design Corporation with Pat Lyle as secretary, Warren Lockhart as president, and Joyce as vice president. However, this professional change only masked for future upheaval in his personal life. On March 16, 1970, Charles Schultz met Tracy Claudius at the Warm Puppy coffee shop in the arena and fell in love with her. They started an affair and would claim during it that Joyce was leaving him. Charles would make the reference that his affair in the strip with Snoopy having a crush on another beagle with soft paws, as Tracy reportedly had soft hands, according to Schultz. Later that year, the Schultzes took a trip to Hawaii to try to save their marriage with family friends, but ultimately failed. When they returned home, Tracy informed Schultz he didn't want to be the other woman and ended the affair, but would still receive letters from him afterwards. According to Joyce, when she found out about the affair, what made it worse is that Charles never even apologized for it. The end of their marriage was in sight, and on June 1971, Coffee Lane was put up for sale, finally sold to the First Assembly of God in Santa Rosa for $800,000. On June 1972, they bought 1,000 acres of land on Chalk Hill Road outside of Harrodsburg, and on April 29th, he reportedly proposed to Tracy, but she turned him down. He even saw one of his old loves, Dina, after nearly 2 decades. Despite Tracy turning him down, Charles knew his marriage was effectively over, so he left Joyce to live in his studio, which strangely enough was where his mother-in-law also lived. This was reflected in a strip on August 2nd, 1971, when Lucy was kicked off the baseball team, and then on August 7th, Schroeder proclaims that now love has a chance. Most significantly, Charlie Brown's persistent stomach aches disappeared from the strip. While they would crop up maybe once or twice in the following decades, it was a device that was ultimately dropped. With his marriage over, Charles Schultz met Jenny Clyde at the Warm Puppy when she brought her 2 daughters to come skating. A 33-year-old woman who was the co-chairman of Building a Better City Committee in Santa Rosa, she was a dynamic young woman that Charlie Brown soon became snooted with. On November 15th, he legally separated from Joyce, with the previous October having taken Janine on his first date. Joyce filed for divorce on December 11, 1972 in Superior Court of California in Sonoma County, requesting custody of their 5 children, spousal support, rights to the shared property, and attorney's fees. The kids found out about it, the parents' divorce, in the news, with one headline stating, "It won't be for peanuts." At the same time, Denise separated from her husband on January 2, 1973. Meanwhile, Tracy, who had married someone else on July 1st, 1972, heard the news and was glad that Charles wouldn't be alone. For many, they actually faulted Joyce, believing that she was the one having the affair with Ed Doherty, the contractor who helped build the arena. While not true, it didn't help that Joyce married Ed shortly after divorcing Schultz, though both their kids approved of the pairing. As the outdoorsy Doty, he hunted, fished, and was a former Army Air Corps pilot, was finally suited for Joyce. In Peanuts, Charles Schultz openly questioned his decision on February 18, 1973 in the strip. In the same time in real life, he declined the Crosby Golf Tournament, one of his favorite golf events, over such misgivings. The February 23rd strip expressed further doubt, believing he had put his kids through torture, and happiness was not a source of humor. On June 11th, he did a strip of baseballs haunting Charlie Brown, ending with Charlie Brown wearing a sack over his head to hide the baseball stitching that was forming in his head. However, with the sack, he becomes the team leader he always aspired to be, only to eventually have it removed to see him completely turn back to normal. Then on April 8th, Jeannie's first influence in the strip came through Peppermint Patty, when she uttered the phrase, "Poor sweet baby," a phrase she used on Schultz. And we will be leaving that strip point for now, and join me next week when we conclude the life of Charles Schultz as peanuts continue to rise, while Charles Schultz makes another personal change in his life.
My name is Mark McCrae, I'm the author of The Best Saturdays of Our Lives.
I'm Dan Klink, co-host of the Best Saturdays of Our Lives podcast.
The Best Saturdays of Our Lives features programming trends from the 1966 television season all the way through the last hurrah of the early digital age of the 1990s.
On the show, if it's animated, we talk about it.
Order your signed copy today at tbsool.com.
And listen to the podcast at esonetwork.com and all podcast platforms.
And now is January 16th, 2025. Time for the favorite comic of the week. G.I. Joe number 3 by Joshua Williamson and Tom Riley, which sees the Joes regrouping after being beaten by Cobra, as one of their own is now dead and their one's missing. Meanwhile, Cobra is furthering their plan to capture some Energon, only to see some division in their own ranks as well. This is just Williamson does a great job that's reestablishing the classic Joe series and starting off in a great way, showing really how the Joes are really on their back foot, but they're starting to regroup and try to fight back. But they show like new elements too that's interesting since it's really the beginning of or like a revamp of the series, and that the Joes don't even know who Cobra is. They know their symbol, they don't know the name they're going by. And it's also great seeing Cobra, like you're seeing the divisions between the Cobra Commander and Destro, and like not everyone's on board, similar to the old series, but done in a new spin that's great, that where old fans can love it, but new fans can come in and still find it a lot of fun too. And it's matched by Tom Riley's art, which has a nice cartoony style, great action pack, but a nice bit of grittiness too, which is like a perfect balance of what a G.I. Joe comic book should be. So it should have a lot of fun and action, but it has to have a grittiness too, because in many ways it is a military war comic, so it's good to retain stuff like that. And all that, plus a killer cliffhanger that sees some other classic G.I. Joe characters show up. And once again, this is another example of why the Energon universe is the best new comic books line out right now, with that, Transformers, Void Rivals, and the other miniseries associated with it. Just a lot of fun, and this comic book is no exception. And with that, I also want to give I finally got around to watching the Season 3 What If on Disney Plus, and I have to say this was probably the most uneven of the series. They went a little too far out there, because the idea behind What If for the cartoon series is supposed to be What If for the MCU. And while you do love hearing like a lot of the actors providing voice performances of their characters, it didn't really gel as much. It was a bit too out there and fun. I did kind of like the Howard the Duck episode with Darcy. That was a fun pairing with Seth Green and Kate Dennings are always a fun comic duo, but the story was a bit out there and a bit too much fun. But overall, you have Disney Plus, you've already seen the first 2 seasons, might as well check this one out as well. And also, I think I should go ahead and mention I am on various social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Tumblr. Just look up History of Comics Podcast. .com and so forth. And also I did join the Blue Sky, not for any political reasons as mentioned with the recent election, but just because a lot of people are on there now. I was like, might as well plant my flag there as well and see where it goes. And with that, we'll conclude with this episode of the archive edition of The Life of Charles Schultz. Join me again next week for reposting of the final edition. And hopefully we might see some new episodes after that. We'll see. I'm hard at work on finally getting another series up and running, and we'll see where that goes. But until then, go out and enjoy some good comic books. And definitely check out G.I. Joe and the rest of the Energon series. That's the best new line of comic books right now.